We promised everybody we talked to Troy Renck at Dove Valley. We need some health updates. What you got here, Jess?
Just 1.5 seconds.
Okay. Troy is on a little bit of a delay, okay?
So it's like we're talking to Europe.
So once Troy, stops talking, wait a second and a half, and then ask your question. All right? Let's go to Troy at Dove Valley. Troy, you there?
I am here, Les. Glad to hear that you have to promote liquor and probably take the edge off just to have me on the air. That's
Hey,
always
Troy,
a good sign.
tell me about the list of injuries today. Tell me about Orlando Franklin and David Bruton and T.J. Ward. Tell me basically, are all of these guys going to be available for the first playoff game 2 weeks from yesterday?
The expectation is that they will all be healthy and be ready to play in the next Sunday's game against either the Steelers, Colts, or Bengals. T.J. Ward, I talked to him at length today. He admitted that he probably couldn't have played yesterday. His teammates felt that had it been a playoff game, he could have gone, but he said his neck just wasn't ready yet, but he thought in a couple of weeks that he'll be fine. David Bruton and Orlando Franklin are both in the concussion protocol, Les, and it's, as we've seen earlier this year with C.J. Anderson, Welker, Sanders, you have to get cleared by an independent physician and then the team doctor. Bruton was also diagnosed with a sprained neck. He was treated and released from the hospital after that violent hit last night on special teams where he kind of got whiplash. But again, they're encouraged that both are progressing okay. It's early in the process, but the expectation is they have a realistic chance to play. And Brandon Marshall should be fine. How he'll play, we don't know, but Brandon has told me that the foot is healing, and he is getting closer and closer to 100%. So the couple weeks off, he should
Brandon
be
Marshall's
ready to
the
go.
guy I want to get into a little bit more. With the replacement linebackers just not being able to do much out there over those last couple of weeks with Brandon Marshall out, his return is going to be key for them to have any kind of defensive success stopping the run in the playoffs. We've seen some foot injuries with Champ Bailey, with Ryan Clady that were much worse and have long-lasting effects. What is the diagnosis and the long-term thought on Brandon Marshall's foot, and can he return back to full speed this year in the playoffs, or is he going to be out there limping around and be compromised?
Well, and it's a great question. We don't get to see him practicing because he hasn't practiced yet. We see him on the side working with trainers. They weren't doing any of that today. They'll resume some of that tomorrow, Chad. But he was working with trainers all last week, moving around. Again, game speed's totally different. But Brandon has told me that the foot feels better than he expected. But you're right. In Ryan Clady's case, you could argue his foot has never fully returned to the health and allowed him to be the player he was before the injury. Ronnie Hillman, though, yesterday looked pretty good, and he took a long time to get back. But Hillman played on a sloppy turf, and he said he was able to cut, and he looked very similar to the guy he was when he went out. But you raised a great point, Chad. Just getting Brandon Marshall back isn't the key. It's getting a healthy Brandon Marshall back, and because he plays in a relentless style, he's very active, and I can't imagine he's a guy that can play, half throttle, trying to protect his foot. But all signs have been encouraging. I've talked to him repeatedly about it, and he's been surprised at how well it's felt. He just doesn't know yet how it will feel closer to game speed.
All right, let's go to the offensive line. Orlando Franklin dinged yesterday. It looks like to me that Ryan Clady's been playing hurt a good portion of this season.
Agreed.
With vast,
I heard Orlando Franklin. I didn't hear the last part of that last.
The offensive line, Clady hurt good portion of this season, playing hurt. Franklin dinged yesterday. Vasquez playing tackle. Can this offensive line hold up against a Pittsburgh, against a New England, or against the Seattle in the playoffs?
Well, and I think the question is about that line. The line's been revamped, and with Vasquez, I'm on record. I didn't like the switch because you take a guy who's the best player at his position in the league and move him out to tackle where he's, mediocre to good, depending on the game. But there's no going back now. I mean, they can't switch it anymore. Can they hold up in the first round at home or in their first game at home? Yes, they can. At New England, that's the great challenge. And it's not just a physical challenge. While New England's physical, it's a chess match with New England, knowing where guys are coming from. I mean, that was part of it with Ninkovich. fooling guys. They drop. Chad knows how they do. They drop into zone blitzes. They send guys on blitzes you don't expect. They take gaps that you're not anticipating from players that you haven't seen do it on film. So a lot of the thing with New England is, can you start thinking along with them and guessing right? Because by the time you are, by that point, you're down 17-3, 20-3, and playing at third place, that's certainly not a recipe for success. But their offense is in a better position in terms of being more balanced than they were a year ago. They have shown the ability to run the ball, so if Peyton Manning is struggling in bad weather, they at least have an option to try to go to the ground attack, where that really wasn't an option this time of year.
Troy, you're there right now. We're not. I'm wondering about the feeling around the complex. Is there an air of confidence as they head into the playoffs, or is there more a feeling of relief that this team has a bye week for the first time in 13 weeks and they really need the time to get healthy mentally and physically?
Well, they love the fact they're getting the time off, because their injury list looked something like the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, there's 20, 21 guys on it. They have guys who need rest and need time to get ready for this next game. But in terms of confidence, although it was the Raiders, and the Raiders are awful, that game allowed them to kind of get their swagger back. And you ask, like, what is the feeling around here? The one difference when talking to people from, based on last year and this year, is they have a defense that is playing its best, probably arguably as good as a defense has played around here in years. And they feel like that defense could do some damage in the playoffs and win a game on its own if it had to. So there's a confidence from that unit. That is the personality of this team, really. Because on offense, the personality comes maybe from C.J. Anderson at times, Emmanuel Sanders, but the defensive team brings the edge, they bring the attitude, and they are really confident. They got their corners playing as well as anybody in football. They've stopped the run outside of one run by Jeremy Hill. They've stopped the run consistently. They are in a good place. So that's where the confidence is coming from, that they're not the same offense they were a year ago, but their defense is so much better that it's giving them this attitude that they have more than a puncher's chance.
All right, so this bye week here to start the playoffs, I've been on teams where it's handled different ways. Some teams use it more as a self-scouting kind of thing, where they really focus on themselves. And I've been on other teams where you watch a day of tape on each of the possible opponents. How are the Broncos going to handle this bye week? Is it a self-scouting thing? Or again, are they going to look at Steelers tape one day, Colts tape one day, and then Cincy tape one day and try to get a jump on next week's preparation?
The coaches are going to do the tape part more, Chad, than the players. The players are doing it more of a self-scouting this week. John Fox set the schedule today where they're going to practice Tuesday and Wednesday, and then he's given them off Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They'll reconvene on Sunday for conditioning and meetings, and then start a regular work week on Monday. But in talking to the players, Chad, they're not trying to bog them down with a bunch of film and hypotheticals on opponents. Now, some guys will do that on their own because they just, they love that part of the game. The coaches are more responsible, at least the way they've laid it out right now, for that side of it. And they're kind of just giving these players a chance to, as you said, self-scout, clean up your own mistakes, give them a mental and physical break for essentially 3 days, and then jump right back into it. So they're tweaking things. John Fox admitted this is their third consecutive year of having a bye, and he's adjusting to this team's personality, adjusting to their strengths and weaknesses. And until they win a Super Bowl, they're going to continue to tinker and experiment. And they're trying to time the rest to give them, basically clear their head, get their bodies right, and then come back full speed ahead. But it doesn't sound like, Chad, right now, that they want the players doing a lot of film work unless they just decide to do it on their own.
Let's look ahead to the playoffs.
I like that. You wait that second and a half for that delay.
Well done.
Yeah.
It's like I've done this all my life.
You should be on TV.
I have a face for TV, don't you think? Let's look ahead to the playoffs this weekend. How badly should Broncos country be cheering for Baltimore to go in there and beat Pittsburgh?
Hey, Les, help me out there because I can't hear that mic. What's the question on that one?
Give it to me again, Mark.
How badly should Broncos country be cheering for Baltimore to beat Pittsburgh?
How badly should Broncos country be cheering for Baltimore to beat Pittsburgh? Because Pittsburgh looks so dangerous right now.
Yeah, it seems funny to say that because Baltimore is, not exactly a favorite team around here based on that playoffs a couple years ago. But I would agree with that assessment that Pittsburgh is arguably the most dangerous because they have the best offense in football, but it all depends on what the status is of Le'Veon Bell. I'm going to be heading out to Pittsburgh to cover that game this weekend, and if he doesn't play with a hyperextended knee and if he's not available or compromised in the following round, they're a completely different team. They can say otherwise, and they have two great receivers in Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant, but nothing would change the fact that they would be losing an MVP candidate in Bell. He's been a bruiser this year, a DeMarco Murray type. Plus, he's a weapon out of the backfield as a receiver. There's no way they can compensate for that loss. So while I understand that thinking, if you're the Broncos, you would prefer to play the Colts or Bengals, teams that you've played this year, and the Bengals you just played. The Steelers don't worry me as much if Bell's not playing. They're a different team.
Hey, Troy, last thing, any revelations from John Fox at his Monday news conference today?
No, just that they want to rest and get healthy. He's been through this so many times, Les, that even if there were, if he had some epiphany, he wouldn't share it in that setting. He feels good right now, though. I mean, 12-4 with their schedule. Is it disappointing that they didn't get home field advantage? Yes. But given their schedule, if you had told them before the year 12-4, one win less, than a year ago, that's pretty good. And he feels like, as a lot of coaches do, once you're in the tournament, once you're in the party and under the velvet rope, anything can happen. Now, that happening at New England, the odds are against it. But you can tell they sense that in a lot of ways, this is a different field. While it's Super Bowl win or bust, some of the pressure's off because they're not the favorite going into this. And that is a fascinating dynamic for me, is even though there's always pressure on Peyton Manning, because they're not the number one seed, will that allow them to play with a little more freedom and a little more aggression and take a few more chances than they would otherwise? And maybe they can parlay that into an upset down the road.
Troy, as always, appreciate your time. Troy Renck out at Dove Valley, writing about the Broncos for the Denver Post along with Mike Kliss.